Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, it is Thursday. So what does that mean? Crossover Thursday. The next team up on the schedule for the Silver and Black, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Week 9 NFL action. That means my guy, Tony Wiggins, host of Locked On Jags. He's going to join the show to talk all things Jaguars, talk about this matchup going down in Jacksonville on Sunday. We'll talk about the biggest storylines, the biggest matchups. We'll give our game predictions. How is the game going to be won or lost for either side of the game, the Jaguars or the Raiders? It's all coming up on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, November 3rd, 2022. Let's get it.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
All right, thank you for joining us for yet another crossover edition of Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Raiders. And we have to let you know that today's episode of both shows is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100. Promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code Locked On. We thank you for making us your first listen. And I got my boy Q. His name is your boy Q, my man from Locked On Raiders, joining us. We're joining each other today as the Raiders come to town to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. Q, what is going on, bro?
Man, just glad to be here with you, man. Talking a little Jaguars, talking a little Raiders, talking week 9 action already. It's already week 9 in the NFL season, man. And I think there's a lot of question marks around the whole league, and in particular with the Jaguars and Raiders.
This is officially over the hump game for the season.
Yep.
Because, it used to be 8-8 on both sides. Now the 9th game is over the hump. But both of these teams are struggling to get over the hump. And what's the biggest stories coming into this game for the Raiders?
Well, it's got to be just the struggles of the team in general. I mean, they're 2-5 on the season right now, and they just got skunked by the Saints last week, 24-0. And there's still so much conversation about what in the world went wrong in New Orleans. But honestly, man, when you go out and you get Devontae Adams, you have Darren Waller, you have Hunter Renfrow, Josh McDaniels is your head coach, who's a very well-known offensive mind. So you think, man, what could go wrong? Well, so far, a lot, right? And so I think the biggest storyline is, when are the Raiders going to figure out how to get things turned around with all the talent that they have? And I'll say top-end talent. There's a lot of, talent, like I said, the wide receiver position, tight end position, even on the defensive side of the ball with Max Crosby, Josh Jacobs running the ball. I don't think that their talent is as deep as I thought it was going into the regular season, but still, there's a lot of talent. They should have more than 2 wins. So the biggest storyline for the Silver and Black has got to be, when are they going to figure it out? How is Josh McDaniels going to get this thing turned around? When are those players going to figure out how to get those things turned around? So for the Jaguars, who also have 2 wins, what's the biggest storyline coming back from London?
Well, the biggest storyline is what we've been trying to – they listen to me. They got a plus 12 differential in score. Plus 12, and they're 2-6. They've lost all 6 games. They've lost 5 in a row, but all 6 games have been by 1 score or less. They've even lost the game by an inch as time expired when they got the ball to the half-foot line or the 1-inch line and couldn't get it in the end zone. So they have just found ways to lose, and I think the mantra of the last few weeks has been, let's find a way to win. But I think they have to go a step further than that, because when you start trying to find a way to win, that means once things start going wrong, they start snowballing and they continue to take on that usual pattern, and then doubt seems to set in. I think what they need to do is create a victory. You need to go snatch it. Don't wait for it. Don't hope for it. Don't just say, I hope nothing goes wrong. Say, regardless of whatever happens, we're going to go out and we're going to play extremely well. I know one of the things that has happened for both of these teams is the running backs. Josh Jacobs has showed up tremendously because I got him on the fantasy team, and he's out there looking like the Taylor kid in Indianapolis. But then Travis Etienne has really, after missing last year, has shown up. Here's what intrigues me about this team, and I'll let you expound on this a little bit. Both were coached in recent years, last year, at least at the beginning of the year, by people that were dysfunctional Eventually, we saw a lot of dysfunction surface on a lot of different levels. John Gruden was run out of the league, and Urban Meyer was run out of the league. And you expected what we expected was, okay, now that King Joffrey and that other dude, Ramsey Bolton, are out, what's going to happen? It's a Game of Thrones reference, but what's going to happen is they're going to get these offensive geniuses, these guys that have experience winning championships, and it's going to be smooth sailing. Well, newsflash, that ain't happened for either one of these teams, and their record is still exactly like it was, and maybe not so much for you, it's worse, but our record is still just like it was last year, and even though they've improved, they haven't improved in the win and loss column.
Right, exactly. And that's the biggest thing for the Raiders. And that's why my expectations were so high going into the season is, look, through all the trials and tribulations that they had last year, they still found a way to win 10 games and get into the playoffs. So I'm thinking it's got to be at least a 10-win team, right? If you got all this and you got this newfound talent in Devontae Adams and Josh McDaniels, who, again, I really respect as a play caller. I know he didn't have a good run in Denver as the head coach, but that was 10 plus years ago. So guys learn, they grow, they get better. So I figured, okay, this is what's going to happen. But similar to the Jaguars, man, early on, except for last week against the Saints, all the Raiders' losses have been so close, one-score games, right? Losing by 1 point on Monday night to Kansas City. That was a heck of a game, and they lost 31-30. And so I'm thinking these guys are going to get things turned around. You mentioned Josh Jacobs. He's been running. It's a contract year. He's running strong. He's showing what he's made of, going back to kind of his rookie year. And it just has not turned into wins consistently. They've picked up a win here. They've lost a game. Picked up a win here, lost a game. No back-to-back wins yet this season. And when they thought that they can get on a roll with teams that look like, and I say this respectfully in air quotes, easier than the early part of the schedule, they haven't been able to do it. Not that they were going to, okay, they beat the Texans. Then they go to New Orleans. They've been struggling. They're giving up 29 points a game. They're turning the ball over like crazy. Okay, go get that victory. All right. Then you got Jacksonville, who, as you know, only has a couple wins on the season. So maybe you get on a roll, feel good about yourself. Then the Colts, they done benched their quarterback. They got another, so it's like everything was kind of setting up for them to be in position to be successful, and they just weren't able to do it. And so that goes back to, the biggest question and storyline. Why not? What's going wrong? Where's the disconnect? And so that's what they've got to figure out. And you'll know this better than anybody. They stayed in Sarasota, Florida this week. They went from New Orleans right to Sarasota and said, we're not going back to Vegas. We're going to go there. We're going to go train at IMG. We're going to go try to have a little bonding situation with the team and then go to Jacksonville and play that game on Sunday, where the Jaguars had to come back from London after losing to the Broncos. And so I don't know if that's going to the start of the game might be a little different because of that. I don't know, but we'll see. Maybe it's something that they're on to. Who knows?
No doubt about it, man. And we're going to talk about some of the key matchups to watch in this game. I got a feeling these things are going to line up a little bit. And what they're going to do is your key matchup and my key matchup are going to be really on board with each other. I'm just guessing that that's what's going to happen. And then we're going to talk about these quarterbacks a little bit too, and some of the things that they have to do in order to make sure that somebody, I tell you what, somebody's going to win. That's no doubt about it. Somebody's going to win. All right, we'll be back. We'll give you more of the crossover with your boy Q and me, Tony Wiggins, here in just a second. I got to tell you about Blue Nile, though. Blue Nile is extremely important to me because it gives me a chance to always bless the lady of my life with a timeless piece. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then help you craft her perfect one-of-a-kind engagement. Make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use the code Locked On to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUNILE.com with the promo code Locked On to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. It's BlueNile.com, promo code Locked On. And we continue with the crossover with your boy Q and Tony Wiggins, Locked On Raiders and Locked On Jaguars. Key matchups. You want me to go first, or you want to go first?
Go on to Rocket, man. Go on to Rocket, because I do think that we're going to kind of line up and have the same key matchups. But let's break it on down.
The Jaguars can't stop no dominant receiver, and if Derek Carr is this much as good as I think he can be on his best day, they're going to have a problem. And one thing that they don't do, they sort of play a shell. They don't switch sides.
Yeah.
The left cornerback, as we're facing the quarterback, has struggled, whether it's been Shaq Griffin or his replacement.
Ooh.
I think Devontae Adams or whoever, if that number 10 dude that ate somebody up earlier in the year, or Renfro or somebody, they are going to absolutely have a field day if Derek Carr is on his game just a little bit. And I think that's going to be a big problem area for Jacksonville because it's been a problem area all year. They saw each other in the Hall of Fame game, and I know things are really vanilla, but something that happened in that game has continued to happen. The linebackers struggled to play the screens and to check the running backs coming out of the backfield. So look for Josh Jacobs. If I was Oakland, or I'm sorry, I said Oakland. If I was Las Vegas, what I would do is this. I'd lean on my two best players. That's Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, and I would wear them out with short passes, intermediate passes, and eventually try to hit something with Devontae Long.
Wow. I'll tell you right now, I thought that our key matchups were going to kind of align. I didn't expect it to be like that. As I've done a little bit of research and been paying attention to the Jaguars, my understanding was the defense was pretty good. And, maybe that's just the front seven is pretty decent. I thought that it was going to be a little bit different, but that's something to obviously note because, look, Devontae Adams has been Devontae Adams in spurts, but he hasn't been Devontae Adams consistently. And Derek Carr's coming off a really bad game. The Raiders offense didn't pass the 50-yard line until about 3 minutes left in the game against the Saints. So they need, if anything, if they need some kind of big, shot in the arm, that would be a welcome sight right there as some corners that are struggling against the pass. Maybe Devontae Adams could break out and have that big-time monster game, and Derek Carr could have that monster performance as well, kind of get them feeling right when they head back to Vegas to go to Allegiant Stadium and host the Colts. So that's interesting on that note. As far as I'm concerned, what I think a huge matchup for the Raiders is Travis Etienne versus the Raiders defense, because Travis Etienne is a dude, and Alvin Kamara just carved up the silver and black. I mean, he took their lunch money and laughed at them last week, right? I mean, 3 touchdowns. He hadn't had any touchdowns all season long. He's running the ball. He's catching the ball. He's talking trash. He's doing all of that, and they had no answer for him. And so I know coming back from that Frank injury and missed his whole season, Etienne has been the guy for the Jaguars. And watching that game, even in London against Denver, and I know they lost that game, it wasn't because of Etienne, man. He did everything he could, and I know that there was turnovers in the game as well, but he did everything he could to try to win that game for him. He put it all on his legs, and he's a fantastic athlete, fantastic player. We all saw him at Clemson when he was coming up. But, man, I think that is the dude right there. And so the Raiders are going to have their hands full. They're going to have to show that defense is a lot better than what they showed a week ago against the Saints, and basically let Alvin Kamara do whatever he wanted to do, and Taysom Hill the same thing. So Etienne is the guy that I'm targeting, put a big X on his back, and if the Raiders are going to win that game, they're going to have to find a way to stop that man. Slow him down. Yes, stop him preferably, because, man, if he gets loose, you know what can happen when he gets loose.
Now I'm going to piggyback off you because I think in the first half, he is going to get loose. Mm-hmm. And I think in the first half, to your credit, the defense will play well. Mm-hmm. The problem with Jacksonville is this. When they have a chance to put teams away, they don't do it. So they'll play extremely well, and they'll be up by 3 at halftime. And what happens is they come out in the second half, and the other team, I know halftime adjustments. I've heard coaches say halftime adjustments are just overrated. Most of the time, they just go in there and yell at people and say, you need to execute. So what happens is, for some reason, one little thing goes wrong, and you almost see the entire body language. Louis Riddick pointed this out on the telecast last week, if you heard it. It's almost like, and Dan Orlovsky did too, it's like, here we go.
Right.
Here we go. Yeah. They have to get them, shake it off. It's almost like when Mickey used to take that stuff and put it on Rocky's face, like, Rock, what are you doing? You want the game to stop and Doug Peterson to just go over and shake the hell out of him and be like, shake it off. You'll be fine. For some reason, stuff starts to go downhill, and there's a missed throw, there's a fumble, there's a personal foul on third down that could have got the team off the field. And these things come in bunches in from the third quarter to the middle of the fourth quarter. Then they get behind, and all of a sudden, here they come making a run, like kids that get on roller coasters that they shouldn't get on because they ain't scared of nothing. And they almost win the game at the end. So I think you're right. I think that could happen, that the defense plays well. And you'll see why they're the best, and they're like the best, worst 2-16 you've ever seen, because all of these games they've done this. Like I said, they're in the plus side of the turnover category,
Yeah.
and I've never seen a team be plus 12 in scoring differential, and they're 2-6.
Right. No, that's a big problem. And look, I mean, I remember, last week, I remember Lawrence throwing the interception on the goal line. Like, you can't do that, right? I mean, you're done it
twice. He's done it twice.
See, that's leaving points out there on the field that you can't do. And I honestly believe both of these teams are in the same position. And I talk about it quite a bit, learning how not to lose as opposed to learning how to win, right? I feel like both of these teams beat themselves. The Raiders early in the season, outside of the Saints game, that's one of those I just poked that in a whole different conversation and say, you know what? That was a bad day to have a bad day. They just no-showed that game. But every other game, I think they beat themselves. I don't think that the other teams really beat them. They had a turnover, stupid penalty, did something, just bad decisions. That's what teams that have 2 wins on the season and you're in the week 9, that's what they do. They just find ways to lose games as opposed to winning. So I think both these teams are really looking at this game like maybe this could be a get-right game for both sides where, hey, we're not going to beat ourselves. We're going to make the Raiders beat them. Or, hey, we're not going to beat ourselves. We're going to make the Jaguars beat us, right? I mean, that's what it's got to be. That's what the theme has got to be for both of these teams, because I think they both have a lot of talent. They have really good head coaches, in my opinion. I know Doug Peterson has actually won a Super Bowl as the head coach. Josh McDaniels has only won it as offensive coordinator, but I still think that he's going to be really good. They just haven't gotten out of their own way yet. So it should be interesting. But, yeah, my big matchup, I think that Josh Jacobs, of course, is going to continue to try to run the rock the way he's been doing. He's been doing it, as you very well know, all season long whenever he gets a chance. Even last week, he only carried the ball 10 times, but he went for 43 yards. So he's still averaging 4.3 a carry, right? I mean, he's doing really well. But the Raiders defense is going to have to step up, man, and find a way to stop ETN. If they do that, and maybe Lawrence will help them out with a couple turnovers or maybe a fumble like you mentioned, they can get on a roll. They don't really create a bunch of turnovers. That's the other thing. They don't. So, it's one of those things. They got to figure it out, and we'll see what happens on Sunday there in Jacksonville.
All right, we're going to talk about what we think is going to happen, because we're going to give up predictions, and then we're going to put an entire bow around this entire thing. I have to tell the people, though, we thank you on Locked On Raiders and Locked On Jaguars for making us your first listen every single day. And for your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, from the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. And I want to tell you, man, you better get your stuff straight if you want to make you some Skrilla, because BetOnline is your number one source for getting football and the start of the new basketball season. You got to go get your information, and you got to do your research before you lay down your wagers, and BetOnline is your number one source to do that. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game. As always, they remain your continued source for all your sports wagering information at BetOnline, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball. Can the Phillies pull it off? We'll see. MMA, boxing, about the fight that'll never happen between Crawford and Spence, and golf. Head to the website today to use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, you start here on a crossover, and normally with your boy Q on Locked On Raiders and me, Tony Wiggins, on Locked On Jaguars. Let's talk about some score predictions. I have predicted the Jaguars in 5 of their losses. Last week was the only reason the only week I didn't predict them to win, and they lost. I had predicted them to be victorious in all 7 games. I am not being a homer. I was really, really looking at the matchups and thinking that was going to happen. I'm not going to do it today. I think the Raiders are going to – I think it's going to be a well-played game, but at some point you'll see those mistakes from a young team that I'm talking about, and they're going to win another one-score game. I have the Jaguars losing 31-24 to the visiting Las Vegas Raiders.
Ooh, there you go. That's a heck of a score right there. It's funny because I was thinking around the same thing. I never like giving score predictions because you never know how these games are going to shake out. I do think that Jacksonville is going to score. I think that they're going to, I think they're going to come out aggressive. I'm interested to see how that whole London thing works, though, just to travel back, just to see if they got their legs underneath them as they get back out there on the in field. Because I always like when you go to London, I like where teams have buys after that, right? So they didn't have a buy, so I think that that's going to be a little problematic. And then on top of that, I just think that the Raiders got to get that terrible taste out of their mouth of what they did in New Orleans. I mean, that was a complete no-show. And so, when it comes to sports in general, man, when a team doesn't show up and they just flat out get beat bad, it's all about what they do next, right? I mean, I always was told, don't allow one loss to beat you twice. So I want to see if head coach Josh McDaniels can live by that mantra. Okay, we're not going to allow one loss to beat us twice. If they do, they go out there and they stick it up against Jacksonville, then all of a sudden you're like, hold on, mayday, call in backup. There's a problem here, right? So they've got to figure something out. I'm assuming that this week that they're spending in Florida together is going to help them get together on the same page, and they'll be able to work some kinks out. I'm giving the Raiders a victory. I don't feel great about it. I'll be 100% honest because, well, when you're a 2-win team, you haven't really earned the 100% confidence, right? You haven't earned that confidence because I'm like you. I've picked them to win multiple games. I didn't pick them to win every game, but I picked them to win multiple games, and it just hasn't happened for one reason or the other. So I think that the Raiders win. I actually had them around 29-24, a little bit closer to you, 29-24, 29-21, around that area. So I like how we're kind of on the same page. But we'll see. We'll really see. I think a lot of it's going to come down to, like I mentioned, Tony, can the Raiders defense slow down ETN? If they can, then they're on that path to that victory. But if ETN goes off and starts eating, it could be a long day at the office for the Raiders.
I get it, and I know exactly what you mean, man. So to give it a good wrap, the biggest stories is who's going to get off the schneid.
Right.
And the Jaguars already had a game last week where both teams were struggling, and they allowed themselves to be the antibiotic for the Denver Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
They can't be act right and get right for the Raiders too. But I got a feeling it's going to happen. One thing I want you to watch, and then I want you to give me, I respect your opinion so much. Trevor Lawrence was mentioned to have generational talent along with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And there was talk about all of those guys. The talk now is that he has generational traits. He has physical talent, and he just might not be that guy.
Right.
But he might always be a guy that's good enough for you not to cut, but never great enough to live up to potential. There's a lot of people that's already saying that because of his body language and the fact that he hasn't led the team. Doesn't it sound a little bit like Derek Carr? Like all the talent in the world.
I was about to say the same thing. You know what? And I'm sure Raider Nation is listening right now. Is like, yep, that's Derek Carr right there. He can have days where he looks phenomenal and fantastic. Then there's other days where he doesn't get past the 50-yard line like last week against the Saints. And I know that doesn't happen very often, but I mean, that was just a really bad day. And so it makes the fan base really start to question, can this guy get it done? Right. And when Josh McDaniels and company took over the Raiders, they gave Derek Carr a contract extension. Literally, that contract extension is really like a 1-year deal. If they want to get out after it, from under it this year, they could. If they want to get out from under it from 2 years from now, they can. I mean, every contract that they did, Darren Waller's extension, Hunter Renfro's extension, Devontae Adams' extension, they all really have, if they're really maxed out, it's about a 3-year window to get it done. So I'm interested to see how Derek Carr bounces back, knowing that this is a new regime, knowing that this is a new system, knowing that he's trying to impress the coaches, also win games, impress the GM. I mean, there's a lot riding on these games, the next handful of games for the Raiders as they close out the 2022 season. Just, how far along can they go? And is this something that they can build on? But yeah, it's a lot of inconsistencies. It sounds like what's going on with Lawrence. And I think last year he was given a pass because Urban Meyer and the way that whole mess happened. And that was, I mean, nobody could have survived that situation. So Doug Peterson, at least he's a calming voice. He's a guy that's been there, done that. He's a heck of a head coach. I really do respect him a lot. So if anyone has a chance to get Lawrence right, it'll be him. Just like I think if anyone could really maximize the talents of Derek Carr, it's Josh McDaniels, a guy that I know has been there, done that. He just hasn't done it as a head coach, and he's got to prove that he can do that as well.
All right, and somebody got to prove Sunday that they can win a football game. And
no ties, man.
Right. Please, no ties, because if that happens, man, we might have to do a show. I'm gonna be in Mexico, but guess what? I might have to hit you up and say, Q, they tied. We're gonna do our post game crying soliloquy and obituary all at one time, man. I'm telling you, bro.
Well, I'll tell you this. If you're in Mexico and they tie, I might go to Mexico and meet you and do a show with you right there on the beach, because that don't sound like a bad place to be, my man.
It doesn't, man. I tell you, it's never a bad place to be on Locked On Raiders or Locked On Jaguars, making us your first listen every single day. We are free on all platforms because it's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And your boy Q is my boy Q every single day of the week. Man, I enjoyed this. It's overdue. It's 3 years overdue. The last time I wasn't answering your emails 3 years ago, and fans jumped all over me. But I appreciate it. I'm glad. I ain't gonna never forget. I always screw up. When I screw up, I'm gonna remember it forever. You ain't gotta remind me.
I remember. I remember when I messed it up too.
No, I ain't gonna give you a chance to bring it up. I'm gonna point at myself. So the thing is, man, it's fun. You're one of the best in the business. You know how I feel about you. I always tell you that. And the sky's the limit, man. So let's see what this game works out to be Sunday, and we'll do a little interaction on social media. But until then, you guys make sure you take care of each other and tune in to Locked On Raiders and Locked On Jaguars every single day on the Locked On Podcast Network.
Appreciate you. Let's do it.